So first we talk about the receptors of the innate immunity. Okay, so innate immunity is broadly distinguishing, right? It is not very specific in nature. It is very broadly able to distinguish between the self and the non-self. So here the receptors which it is utilizing is again will be recognizing some features which are broadly differentiating the pathogen from the host organism. Okay, so these receptors are called as the pattern recognition receptor. That means they recognize a particular pattern. The pattern is missing in the host, but the pattern is present in the pathogen. Okay, so that is why pattern recognition receptor. Now these patterns are also called as pathogen associated molecular patterns. Okay, so or in short PAMPs. Okay, and here we can also call it as the PRR. Okay, pattern recognition receptor. Okay, so PRR and PAMs. Okay, now what are the nature of these patterns? So nature of these patterns are these they should be present in such a manner that it should allow the PRR to distinguish between self and non-self. So obviously they should not be present in the self. Okay. For example, we can take the LPS, lipopolysaccharides. These are found only in the bacterial system, never found in the mammalian system or the eukaryotic system mostly. Okay, so this is what is a pattern which is only found to be present, conserved in the host, in the pathogen and shared among the pathogen. That means whatever be the type of the bacteria, gram-negative bacteria, it is always going to have this lipopolysaccharide. So this is something conserved among the broad range of the pathogens. Okay, and it is never going to be present in the host. So it is absent in host and it is conserved and shared among the pathogens. So some of these patterns could be something which are expressed on the surface, like we have the gram-negative bacteria's lipopolysaccharide. So it is expressed on the surface of the pathogen. Okay. Same way, gram-positive bacteria, it could be the lipoteichoic acid. Okay. Or it could be some cell wall component of the yeast, like we have some stretches of mannose. Okay. So this will be mannose containing some polysaccharides. So that will be the part of the cell wall. Okay. So this will be again expressed on the surface. Or it could be like some glycolipids. In case of the Mycobacterium, it is expressed on the surface of the particular pathogen. Okay, so either it is expressed on the surface or it is something which is present inside. For example, you can have the DNA containing some CpG islands which are unmethylated. Okay, mostly in case of mammalian system, what do we find? CpG islands are methylated. Okay, but in bacterial system, these are unmethylated. So this is again working like a pattern which is different in case of pathogen from that of the host. Okay, same manner, presence of double-stranded RNA. Okay, this is something usually found in case of the viruses, not found in case of the mammalian system. So again, this could be working like a trigger to activate some of the PRR. Okay, so these are the different types of the patterns, either internal patterns or it is a external pattern. Okay, so clear about this? Yeah. Yes, online students, clear about the patterns? Okay. Yes. Yeah, fine. Now, what do we see is the receptors which recognize this pattern, mostly they are lectin-like receptors. Okay, they recognize sugar molecules, they recognize LPS. Okay, like these molecules they will be recognizing. Okay, and they will bind multivalently. That means maybe there is a stretch of sugar. Okay, maybe a polymer like this will be created by different sugar molecules. So they will bind to this entire stretch. Okay, so this is how they are binding multivalently. Fine. So they are lectin-like and they bind multivalently. So that is the nature of this pattern recognition receptor. Okay. Now let us go into detail of this receptors. Okay. Now the receptors, because they are part of the innate immunity, they can be present in two forms. Okay. One form is soluble form. They are present in the tissue fluid, in the blood circulation, and they circulate throughout the body. Okay. So under this, what all we have? We have the mannose binding lectin. Okay. So this is a protein which is recognizing the mannose sugar of a polysaccharide. Okay. So mannose sugar, part of the cell wall of the different types of pathogens. Okay. Then we have C-reactive protein which will recognize a specific type of a phospholipid. Okay. Then we have lipopolysaccharide, again a phospholipid binding protein. Okay. So these are the different, even complement is also a type of a, we can say, the pattern recognition type of a receptor. Okay. So these are circulating receptor. Then we have the membrane bound receptors. So membrane bound receptors are present or expressed on the surface of the cells like the macrophages, that is phagocytic cells, neutrophils, dendritic cells. Okay. So under this we have two types of receptors. One is called as the scavenger receptor or SR receptor. Another is called as the toll-like receptor. Okay, or TLRS. Okay. So let us look at their function one by one. Okay. Coming to the soluble receptors. Okay, soluble receptors, they are present in the blood circulation, in the tissue fluids, okay, in the lymph. So like we have the complement. Okay, so complement protein remain in inactive form in the bloodstream, in the tissue fluids. Okay. Once they come in contact with the microbial cell wall component, maybe it could be something like your mannose. Okay, so whenever these type of components will be interacting, immediately there will be complement activation, and once the complement activation takes place, what all can happen? It can start coating the pathogen. Okay, it can perform the opsonization, and followed by that there could be phagocytosis. Okay, what else it can do? Complement can itself perform the lysis of the pathogen. That can also happen. Okay, so complement activation leads to opsonization and phagocytosis. It can also directly cause the lysis of the pathogen. And one more thing that it can do is it can trigger the general inflammatory response, so that it will trigger more and more recruitment of the neutrophils, macrophages to this particular location wherever the pathogen has been identified. Okay. Next we have the mannose binding lectin. So again, location is the bloodstream and the tissue fluids. So as the name suggests, it is mannose containing, okay, microbial carbohydrates will be recognized. So mostly these will be expressed on the cell wall of the pathogen. So these will bind to these type of carbohydrates. Once they bind, they in turn activate the complement. Okay, and again complement activation will be followed by opsonization, phagocytosis, lysis, and general inflammation. Okay, so these will be the effects. Then we have the C-reactive protein, CRP in short. Again, bloodstream and tissue fluid is the location here. What they are recognizing? They are recognizing the phosphatidylcholine. Okay. Again, this is found to be present on certain microbial membranes, or maybe if you have a cell which is killed by a pathogen, then what will happen? You will have some necrosis type of death happening, so the cellular components will be coming out. Okay, so the plasma membrane components can be releasing this phosphatidylcholine. Okay, and then what can happen is they can go and bind to it, and then they can trigger the complement. Okay, either it is present on the microbial membrane, or it is released from the dead type of the cells. Okay, so again, complement activation, opsonization, lysis, inflammation. These are the responses. Fine. Then the last one is LPS binding protein. Okay, again location is same. Now here what it is recognizing? It is recognizing a bacterial lipopolysaccharide, okay. But it is not triggering the complement. What it does, it will form a complex with the LPS and then it will take it to the macrophages or to the neutrophils or the dendritic cells, and it will deliver this lipopolysaccharide to the membrane bound receptor. Okay, so we already know there are two types of receptor, toll-like receptor and the SR receptors. So here it will be a toll-like receptor which will receive this LPS. Okay, so as it is receiving the LPS, it further forms a complex with CD14, MD2, and together they will start triggering some signals. Okay, and as a result, then phagocytosis can happen. Then some signaling pathways will be getting activated. Like mostly you have NF-kappa be activated. Okay, that will lead to production of cytokines. Okay, activation of macrophages. Like this, it can bring about the effect of killing the particular pathogen. Okay, so these are the receptors which are present in soluble form, and most of the cases they are activating the complement. Only one case we find they are targeting or taking the LPS to the target or to the phagocytic cells. Okay, that is how they are working. Yes, is it clear this part? Yes, online students? Okay. Okay, fine. Last point. Okay, fine. So once this LPS binding protein binds to the lipopolysaccharide, suppose let us assume we have a bacteria here, we have a LPS binding protein. Okay, now this protein binds to it. Usually what so far we saw, they after binding they are activating the complement, but here it does not work like that. This will be in the blood circulation. What it will do, it will make the complex and it will try to locate the phagocytic cells, maybe neutrophils, maybe macrophages, maybe dendritic cells. Okay, and then once it reaches these type of cell, these cells will be expressing some toll-like receptor. Okay, what they will do, this LPB will transfer this LPS to this toll-like receptor. So now it will come and bind here. Okay, so it is transporting, it is working like a carrier. Okay, it is transferring this LPS from a blood circulation to maybe some lymph node where this macrophage is waiting or the neutrophil is waiting, and immediately it will transfer it to it. And once it is transferring it to that particular cell, what it will do, it will trigger the activation by signaling, activating some signaling pathways. Once it is activated, it can perform phagocytosis, it can start releasing cytokine. Okay, so these type of responses will be all together killing the pathogen. Okay, now clear how it is working? Okay, fine. Now, this was all about the soluble receptors of the innate immunity. Now, what about the other receptors? Yes, now there are some membrane-bound receptors. Majority is the toll-like receptor. There, in case of human beings, some 10 specific toll-like receptor gene has been identified. Okay, mostly these genes are expressed in the germline cells. Okay, now what happens? This toll-like receptor, all of them, the function is still not known. Okay, so only out of the 10, 6 or 5, the function is very well known. Okay, so let us talk about the toll-like receptor 2. Now it will be expressed on the membrane of the cells. Okay, and along with toll-like receptor 6, okay, most often they are found to work together. They are having the ability to recognize different types of the cell surface components of the pathogen. Okay, they can recognize the cell wall components of a gram-positive bacteria, that it could be a teichoic acid. Okay, or they can also recognize the cell wall components of the gram-negative bacteria, that is lipopolysaccharide. Okay, at the same time, they can also recognize the cell wall component of a yeast. Okay, Okay, like mannose containing zymosan. Okay, so like this, they have the capacity to target different type of pathogens pattern. Okay, and based on that, they will go and bind. Once they go and bind, what they do, they bring about, because they are present on the macrophage of the phagocytic cells, right? So what they do is they start the activation of the macrophages. There will be signaling pathway getting activated, which will release interleukins. Interleukins will start attracting the other phagocytic cells, okay, like the dendritic cells, neutrophils, and other macrophages. They will also get activated, and ultimately, what do we find? They will perform the phagocytosis. They can also release their hydrolytic enzyme and then degrade the pathogen which they are not able to phagocytose. Okay, this is the way they will be working. Additionally, they are producing the cytokines which are needed for again triggering the general inflammation. So interleukin 1, interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor alpha. Okay, all these will be triggering the general inflammation. Okay. Next we have the toll-like receptor 3. Now what it is recognizing? It is recognizing a double-stranded RNA. Okay, so many of the viruses, they actually have this double-stranded RNA as the genetic material, or maybe it will be produced during the step of the replication. Okay, now once it is recognizing this, the role of this toll-like receptor 3 is to trigger the pathway which will ultimately lead to activation of those genes which are involved in the production of the interferon. Okay, so interferon production will start. So once a virus infection takes place inside a cell, we find the toll-like receptors will detect the presence of the double-stranded RNA. They will start the signaling. So many cases you can have signaling of the same type, NF-kappa B signaling, NF-AT signaling, okay, even PI3K signaling, those type of signaling could be activated. Ultimately, what do we find? Those genes are getting expressed which are producing the interferon. Now these cells will be releasing the interferon and they will be creating an antiviral state in the nearby cells. Okay, so this way the toll-like receptor 3 will be working. Okay, next we have toll-like receptor 4. Now this is specific for LPS. Actually, toll-like receptor 2 as well as 4 both can work for the LPS, but this is specialized to work for LPS. This is more generalized. Okay. Now, mostly the transfer with the LPB takes place to this toll-like receptor 4. Okay, and then it forms a complex with 2 more proteins. Together, it will again trigger some signaling pathways, and that pathways will again activate the macrophage, attract the different type of pathogens or the phagocytes. Okay, and they also induce the secretion of several types of the cytokines. So this is the way they will be working. So this is actually a common mechanism. Okay. Then we have toll-like receptor 5. Now what it is recognizing? It is recognizing the flagellin protein. So flagellin protein will be part of the flagella. Definitely it is not present in the mammalian cells. Okay. So once it binds to this, again it will bring about the same type of the effect of attracting the phagocytes, activating macrophage, dendritic cells, and secretion of the cytokines. Okay. Then we have the toll-like receptor 9. Now what it is recognizing? It is recognizing the unmethylated CpG islands in the DNA, okay, of the pathogen. So once these are identified, again different type of pathways will be activating and outcome will be same type of the effect. Okay. So these are the well-known toll-like receptor whose functions more or less we understand, and how they work that also we understand by activating different type of signaling pathways. Okay. Now what something that we should know is toll-like receptors are found to be highly conserved. Okay, they are found to be present in the simple vertebrates like the Drosophila. Even they are found in the higher vertebrates like the human beings. Okay, so they have been very well conserved throughout the evolutionary mechanism. Okay, so they play an important role in giving the protection at different ranges of the organism. Okay, now coming to the last type of the receptor. Okay, that is the scavenger receptor, again present on the surface of the phagocytic cells. Okay, Now they have multiple roles. They can perform the phagocytosis of the gram-positive, gram-negative bacteria. Okay. At the same time, they are also working in case there is a apoptotic cell. Okay, so there will be formation of some apoptotic bodies, right? So those bodies have to be phagocytosed and then have to be degraded. So it will help in recognizing such type of the apoptotic bodies, and it will help in the phagocytosis and degradation. So it is targeting something which is foreign as well as those things which are dying inside the cell. Okay, so that is the role of the scavenger receptors. Okay, so phagocytosis or endocytosis, that is the major role of the scavenger receptors. Okay, so clear about the membrane bound receptors? Yes, so these are the major types of innate immunity receptor, which is recognizing only a specific pattern which is mostly absent in the host and only found to be present in the pathogens. Okay. Okay, yes. Yes, online students, clear for everyone? You try to remember these because you get matched the following type of questions. Okay, mostly from the stall-like receptor. Okay, fine. So you should know what is working for what. Okay, so just remember that. I guess in last June one question came. Okay, based on this. Right? Okay. Yes. Now, whatever we saw till now was the innate immunity receptor. Now, what is the general feature of the receptors of the adaptive immunity? Adaptive immunity receptors are mainly of two types based on where they are present. So, those which are present on B cell membrane, okay, these are called as the antibodies. They can also be secreted out from the B cells, and in that case they will be present in the blood and the tissue fluid. Okay, so antibodies are the one type of receptors, and other type of receptor is a T cell receptor. Now this one is never secreted out like the antibody. It will be always present on the cell surface or the T cell membrane. Okay. Now what type of molecules they are going to recognize? So any type of the specific component of the pathogen, mostly recognizing proteins. Okay. It can also recognize the LPS. Okay. Sometimes we can also make them specifically recognizing the genetic material, okay, the DNA, RNA, or it could be also developed against some sort of the polysaccharides. Okay, so it could be any specific component, but mostly it is preferring the proteins. Okay, and what is the effect that it is going to bring about? Okay, usually antibodies, they don't do anything. Okay. What they do, they just label the pathogen. Okay, and once they label it, then what can happen is phagocytic cells can recognize it. Okay, or maybe the complement can be getting activated and complement lysis can happen. Okay, or maybe there could be other type of cells which perform the ADCC. They can come and bind and they can start secreting their components and kill the pathogen. Okay, so this is the way the antibody will be working. Okay, and sometimes they just work in clearance of the pathogen from the blood circulation. Okay, what they will do, they will bind to it, the pathogen, then complement will bind to the pathogen, and then RBC will come. RBC will bind to the complement, it will take it to liver, there it will pass it to the macrophages. So like this, it is helping in immune clearance. Okay, to clear out the pathogen or parts of the pathogen from the blood circulation. So these are the roles of the antibody. But the basic thing what it is doing is, it is just going and binding to the surface of the pathogen and it is coating the pathogen. So like this, it will create a coat on the pathogen surface. Okay, and immediately after this, other type of cells or molecules can come and bind, and they can lead to the killing of the or the elimination of the pathogen from the body. Okay. Now what about the T cell receptor? T cell receptor mostly recognizes protein, that also processed protein. Okay, and some cases they can also recognize the lipids. Okay, and here once this receptor is getting activated, okay, so it could be present on a T helper cell, right, or it could be present on a TC cell. Now, if it is a T helper cell, it has the ability to trigger the humoral immunity, right? Because it can secrete the cytokines which can activate the B cells, right? At the same time, if it is present, it can also secrete some cytokine which can activate the T cells, okay? As well as TC also needs to bind to the pathogen through these receptors. Once it binds, then only the cell-mediated immunity will be getting activated, okay? So, whenever we take the T cell receptor, here it is having the ability to activate both the humoral system, which will produce the antibody, as well as it will also activate the cell-mediated immune system, which will directly kill the pathogens, okay? Fine, so these are the basic features of the receptors of the adaptive immune system, okay? Now, if we try to go in little bit details about their characteristics, okay, then we can differentiate the B cell receptor and T cell receptor based on some features, okay, like how they interact with the antigen, okay. So usually what do we see is you have an antibody and you have a antigen. It will come and bind like this, okay. So here it is a binary complex, okay. So one antibody binding site binds to the one of the epitope of the antigen. So it forms a binary complex. But what about T cells? T cells form a ternary complex, okay. So there will be a T cell receptor, there will be a MHC molecule, and then the peptide will be present in the associated with the MHC molecule. So T cell receptor has to recognize the peptide, T cell receptor has to recognize the MHC molecule. So here we will have a ternary complex formation. We can see the diagram. Well, we have already seen that under epitopes. See, this is the binary complex, okay, and this is the ternary complex, okay. 1, 2, 3, and here 1 and 2, okay. So that is what binary and ternary complex formation in case of the B cell receptor, in case of the T cell receptor, okay. Where I went? Yes. Now, what type of antigen they can recognize, okay. Now, when we talk of the antibodies, they can recognize the soluble antigen, okay. They have the capacity to recognize a soluble antigen. Any pathogen which is, or any LPS or any peptide of the pathogen which is circulating in the blood or the tissue fluid, once the antibody comes in contact, it can go and bind to it, okay. So that is why it is able to recognize a soluble antigen. But what about T cells? They cannot recognize a soluble antigen. Why? They need the antigen to be processed and presented on the MHC molecule. Only then they will recognize it. So here the antigen is immobilized. It is not soluble. Okay. So that is the second difference between the B cell and the T cell receptor. Then third, involvement of the MHC molecule. Definitely the B cell receptors do not need the MHC molecule. It is only the T cell receptor which need the MHC molecule to display the processed antigen. Okay. Then what is the chemical nature of the antigen? So here it could be protein, it could be polysaccharide, it could be lipid, and some extent it could be the DNA or RNA also. Okay. But in case of T cells, mostly it is the protein. Some cases it could be the lipid or the glycolipid. Okay. So some rare type of T cells are there, or the minor subtype of the T cells which can recognize the lipid or the glycolipids, but most of the T cells are going to work against the protein antigens. Okay. So that is the chemical nature of antigen that is differing from B cell and the T cell. Okay. Then what is the property of the epitopes? Okay. So we saw the entire antigen is not going to bind to the receptor, only the part of the antigen will bind, and that is what is the epitope. So what should be the nature of the epitope in both the cases? Okay. So when we talk about the B cell, because B cell receptors are recognizing soluble antigens. Okay. So that means the if you have a soluble antigen somewhere here, okay, suppose, and it is able to go and bind. So definitely the epitope should be accessible. It should be present on the surface of the antigen. Okay. If it is inside, then it cannot access it. If it is somewhere here, then antibody cannot reach inside. Okay. So epitope has to be accessible epitope. Okay. And because it is present on the surface, and if it is a protein, definitely it has to be the hydrophilic type of a peptide, okay, or a sequence of the protein, hydrophilic in nature. So peptide or the epitope has to be hydrophilic in nature because it will be present on the surface. Okay. What else? This peptide or the epitope, it should be mobile in nature. That means it should be flexible, because here the binding site of the antibody and the epitope should be changing their structure little bit to fit to each other. Okay, so approximately some 15 amino acids of the 15 or less than that also is possible of the epitope could be interacting with the antibodies. Okay, and when they are interacting, there will be hydrogen bonding interaction, there will be some type of the salt bridges which will be created. So these type of interactions will be taking place. So that is why it is more or less like the induced fit model of the enzyme and substrate binding. So the peptide which is, or the epitope which is going to bind, has to be little bit flexible so that it can fit inside into the structure which is a binding site of the antibody. Okay. What else? Now the peptides which are binding, they can be containing sequentially present amino acid, or they could be containing non-sequentially present amino acid. Okay. Now here is we are trying to understand how the antibody binding differs based on the structural complexity of the protein. Okay. Usually when we talk of a globular protein, okay, or any type of a quaternary structure, tertiary structure, okay. Tertiary structure means it will be highly folded like this, okay. Some type of beta sheet or alpha helix folds will be there. Now what happens? Maybe you have an antibody binding site, okay. So maybe it is recognizing a alanine from here, okay. It is recognizing a leucine from here, and it might be recognizing somewhere here one serine, okay. Now what happens? The three amino acid which it is going to recognize and bind, they are not present sequentially. They are present in different segments of the fold. Okay, so this is what is the non-sequential amino acid. Okay, now what can happen if you somehow denature this? Then they will linearize. Okay, maybe some part of the fold will still be there, some part might be linearized. Then what can happen? Maybe the alanine is somewhere here, the serine is somewhere here, and the leucine or the lysine, whatever it is, somewhere here. Okay, then the structure of antibody is still like this. So that means now it cannot bind to this type of the chain structure of the epitope. Okay, so in this case it will be ineffective in binding to the particular epitope. Okay, that is the problem with protein. So if you want to create a vaccine, okay, and suppose you inject one form, maybe you inject a heat filled form, then what will happen? Maybe the structure might have changed. Okay, so maybe now it is binding to some other molecule, some other sequence of amino acid, and these sequences are these amino acids are present one after the other in a sequential manner. So maybe now it is valine, it is glycine, and it is arginine. Okay, so like this it is binding. So in that case it is only recognizing this, but when the actual infection will happen, this fold will be there. So this antibody will never recognize this fold. Okay, so based on this we find the binding could be with the amino acid which are present sequentially, or the amino acid which are present non-sequentially. Okay, so this gives us an idea that we have a challenge whenever we want to develop a vaccine. We should be retaining the epitope structure. Then only the antibody produced will be effective. Otherwise, it won't be effective in recognizing the particular pathogen. Okay, so that is why we should know what type of epitope actually these receptors bind, because it will help us in designing the vaccines. Okay, so for B cell, it has to be something accessible, something hydrophilic, something little bit flexible in nature, and it could be either part of a sequential or the non-sequential type of the amino acid. So based on that, we should see whether the treatment which we are providing to develop a vaccine is destroying the structure from a linear form to other form, or maybe folded form to a linear form. Okay, that part we have to be very clear. Okay. Now what about the T cells? On the other hand, what should be the nature of epitope? Now here, never you will have a folded protein. Okay, always suppose you have a protein like this. Okay, it has got so many folds. Now what will happen? Phagocytic cell will take it up and it will degrade into linear peptides, and there will be a specific length of the peptide also. Okay, so that means here it is immaterial whatever be the form of the particular pathogen or the particular antigen. Ultimately it is going to get degraded. Okay, so here the peptides which are generated are linear peptides, and they could be internal. That means you can take the peptide from anywhere. Okay, when it is folded, then to be accessible, it has to be present externally. But when it is degraded, it could be coming from external fold or it could be coming from an internal fold. Okay, so here chances are there that you can have some hydrophobic type of peptide coming and binding, rather than only being hydrophilic as in case of the B cell receptors. Okay, so something which could be present inside, those type of peptides can also come and bind. Okay, and because it is small molecule, flexibility will be less, right? It will be not that much mobile as in case of the B cell receptors. Okay, and definitely here it has to be sequential, because it is taking a one complete stretch of the peptide. It cannot be non-sequential. It has to be sequential in nature. Okay, so these are the differences between the B cell receptor and the T cell receptor. Okay. The reason for hydrophilic. Okay, Neelam, have you attended Unit 1? Yes. Have you studied the protein folding? What actually happens during protein folding? Just tell me that part. See, a protein will have hydrophobic amino acid, it will have hydrophilic amino acids, right? So when it folds, usually it tries to put the hydrophobic amino acids inside, right? Yeah. So that is why the B cell receptors are only going to bind to those amino acids which are present outside, which are present on the, exposed on the surface of the protein. So definitely they should be hydrophilic in nature, right? Now clear, Neelam? Yes, yeah. What about others, online students? Clear about the differences between the B cell receptor, T cell receptor? Okay, yeah. Soluble receptor. Okay, after the class. Okay, because I have already done so many slides, so rather than going back, let us meet after the class. Okay, fine. Now, let us compare. So far whatever we have understood about the innate immunity receptor and the adaptive immunity receptor, let us now compare both of them. Okay. So the characteristics first is the specificity. Okay. So just a second. So specificity. In case of innate immunity, it is recognizing some broad patterns, molecular patterns, right? So these patterns are highly conserved to be present in the pathogens. Okay, never going to be found to the host cells. Okay, whereas in case of adaptive immunity, they are going to look for details of the antigen structure. Why? Because they are looking for even the sequence of amino acid. So that much specific is the adaptive immunity. Okay. Whereas when we talk about the ability to discriminate between self and non-self, then here the ability is perfect. Okay, it will never make any mistake. Okay, why? Because the patterns which are recognized, they are developed or they are such that they are never found to be present in the host cells. They are only found to be present in the pathogens. So there is actually a evolutionary gap. That is why those patterns are never found in the host, but they are found in the pathogens. So this is why what happens, innate immunity will never mistake the self cell as the foreign cells. Okay. Whereas what about the adaptive immunity? Here the ability to distinguish is again excellent, but it is not perfect. Okay. Why? Because occasionally what it is recognizing only some sequences of amino acid. Maybe. So occasionally what can happen, these sequences could be part of some self protein as well. So what can happen, they can somehow mistake these proteins which are present in the cell to be acting as a foreign particle. Okay. So that is the difference between the innate and the adaptive immunity. Okay. So clear about this? Yeah? Yes, what about online students? Clear about this, the specificity and the discrimination? Okay, yes, fine. Okay, yeah. So this is actually more broadly specific, this is more minutely specific. It will go for details, and that is why it might create a problem. Okay. Yes, autoimmune diseases are because of the adaptive system. Yes, not the innate immunity. Okay. So because that is looking for details, but innate immunity is just looking for the broad differences. Something like, no, if you compare the Indian khadi with foreign denim, okay, both are cotton made, but both are very different from each other. So innate immunity will never make a mistake. Adaptive immunity will look for cotton. Okay, then it will make a mistake. Okay, it will understand, okay, both are made up of cotton, so both are foreign. But innate immunity knows, okay, no, khadi is Indian. Okay, and it will not distinguish or it will not recognize the denim as a Indian. Okay, so that way you have to understand it. So one is looking for detail, another is looking for some broad features. Okay, broad patterns. So that is why it is never making the mistakes. Okay. So now with this we have understood what are the different receptors of innate immunity. Please try to remember the toll-like receptors, what type of molecule they are recognizing. That is important. Okay. And the general features of the adaptive immunity receptors and how we can differentiate the innate immunity receptor and the adaptive immunity receptor. Now let us look into detail of the adaptive immunity receptor. Okay. So now we have to study the structural details, okay, of each receptor. So first we will start with the antibody, then we have the co-receptors, then we have the T cell receptor, their co-receptors. Like this we have to study so many receptors. Okay. Now you get questions from these. Okay, you get questions from antibody, you get questions from MHC molecule, you also get question from T and T cell receptor, B cell receptor, their general features. Okay, so that is why we have to understand the general features, their structure, how they work. Okay, so that part is important. We cannot skip this part. Okay, so first coming to the antibody. Antibody, we already have seen it is produced by the B cells. It could be either present as a membrane bound form, okay, or it could be secreted and it will be then present in this body circulation. Okay. So it is again a glycoprotein. Okay, so whatever is actually most of the expressed proteins are the glycoproteins. Okay, we also call it as a immunoglobulin. Okay, basically, it is when people were in the earlier day, they were trying to understand what is the composition of blood. Okay, that time they found there is a globin fraction of protein. Okay, and then they understood this globin fraction of protein is having some role in immunity. Then they gave this name immunoglobulin. Okay, and what else? Yes, they have some specific site for binding of the specific antigenic epitope. Okay, that is the nature of the antibody. Okay. Not audible? Yes, online students? Yeah? Is it audible for the others? Audible, okay. Madhumanti, are you still not able to hear me? Yes? Oh, she has left already. Okay. So now we'll look into the basic structure of the antibody. Okay, you can see a broad overview about the structure of the antibody. So antibody already we understood is a glycoprotein. So when it is a protein, it should be made up of amino acids, right? And here it could be something like made up of single polypeptide. Okay, but here it is made up of 4 polypeptides. Okay, so it is basically giving rise to what? The quaternary structure. The highest level of folding is a quaternary structure here. Okay, so 4 polypeptide chains. Actually, it should be polypeptide chains. Okay, which give rise to a heterodimer-like structure. Okay, that means here there will be 2 identical light chains. Why light? Because their molecular weight is less, approximately 25,000 daltons, and there are 2 identical heavy chains. Here the molecular weight is very high. Okay, so that's why heavy chain, approximately 50,000 dalton. Okay, so these are the 4 polypeptides which will be making up one specific what is that, antibody? Okay, yes. So here this is the structure. It's a Y-shaped structure actually. Okay, and this is a light chain, shorter. Okay, and this one is a heavy chain which is longer. Okay, so you have okay, how this arrangement will be like? Arrangement will be one heavy chain will combine with one light chain. Okay, and how the combination will take place? There will be disulfide linkages. Okay, along with that there will be salt linkages. Okay, hydrogen bonds. Okay, hydrophobic bonds. These type of interactions will be forming one heterodimer of heavy and light chain. Okay, like this we have one more set of heavy and light chain combination or a heterodimer formation. How? By again a disulfide linkage formation, by the other type of the non-covalent interaction. Okay, ultimately then these 2 dimers, these 2 heterodimers will again join together. Okay, and then they will create the structure, okay, which we call it as the dimer of dimers. Okay, or we can also write it as HL2. Okay, 2 should be in subscript. Okay, it is now here it is somehow come as the normal font, but it should be in subscript. Okay, so like this further the 2 heavy chain light chain dimers will join together to create the dimer of dimer, or again a heterodimer kind of a structure. Okay, and again the interactions are of disulfide linkages and same type of non-covalent interaction. The hydrophobic interaction, salt bridges, okay, the hydrogen bonding, these type of interactions will be holding these 2 dimers together. Okay, and here just a second. Okay, this part we will see later on. Okay, now apart from this arrangement, what else do we find? Now the length of this will be approximately some 330 to 440 amino acid. Okay, so there will be some level of folding. Okay, so primary is just the arrangement of the amino acid, the sequence of amino acid. Secondary, there will be some beta sheet formation. Okay, like this. The tertiary beta sheets will further become together and form some globular structures. Okay, domain-like structures. That is the tertiary, and each domain will be then interlinked to the another domain. Okay, so this part is actually one domain. Okay, and this part is another domain. Like this, we have some 4 domains in the heavy chain, and there are some 2 domains in the light chain. Okay, again the domain number can change based on which type of heavy chain it is. Okay, actually what they found when they went for sequencing, they found that whether it is a light chain or a heavy chain, the N-terminal 110 amino acid, that means the first domain, will be showing differences in their amino acid sequences. They will never be same. Okay, that is why we call this domain as a variable domain or variable region. Okay, so this is found to be present in heavy chain also, found to be present on the light chain also. So we represent it as VL or VH. So initial N-terminal 110 amino acid are going to have different sequence in different antibodies. Okay, and then in that region, the variable region again, there will be some specific regions which will show hypervariability. That means they are again of more variable differences. Okay, so these are called as the complementarity determining regions or CDR regions, and every V region will have 3 CDRs: CDR1, CDR2 and CDR3. Actually these are the regions which will be directly interacting with the epitope of the antigen. Okay, variable region under that hypervariable region are called as CDRs. CDRs interact with the epitope of the antigen. Okay, then the rest of the sequence, if we see, of both the heavy chain and the light chain, their sequences are more or less constant. So they are called as the constant region. If it is in the light chain, we name it as CL. If it is in the heavy chain, we name it as CH. Okay. Now, okay, let me clear the slide. Yes. Now, because here in light chain the length is shorter, so you have only one variable, one constant region. Okay. But the sequence of this constant region is found to belong to 2 types only. Okay. So based on that, we classify it as either as a kappa light chain or the lambda light chain. Okay. So whatever be the antibody, either they are going to have a kappa type of sequence here, or they are going to have the lambda type of the sequence here. Okay. So in one antibody, both the light chains here has to be of same type. That means either kappa or lambda. Both the light chains will be of the same pattern. Okay. Now what about the heavy chain? Heavy chain will have again longer length, so there will be more domains. Okay. So there will be constant region domain 1, domain 2, domain 3. Okay. And based on some sequence differences, we classify them into 5 major types. We call it as an isotype. Okay. So one is you have a mu heavy chain, then you call that antibody is IgM. This is a IgM isotype. Okay. Then you have a gamma heavy chain, then you call it as the IgG antibody isotype. Then it is alpha, then it is IgA isotype. When it is delta, then it is the IgD, and when it is epsilon, then it is the IgE. That means you have different isotypes of antibody, and that is based on what type of constant region is present in the heavy chain. Okay, so both the heavy chains will have the same constant region. That means if it is IgM, both will have the mu type of the constant region. Okay. Now, based on which type of heavy chain, they can either have a flexible, kind of the hinge region. Okay. Hinge region will be proline rich, cysteine rich. Okay. They will help in forming the disulfide linkage. They will also provide the flexibility to this binding sites. Okay. And in some cases this might be absent. Okay, then it will not be that much flexible. In that place, what they can have is the CH2 domain. Okay, in place of this flexible hinge region, and CH2 domain will be having the CH3 replaced by CH3, and CH3 will be replaced by CH4. Okay, so hinge region will be replaced by CH2 domain. CH3 will replace the CH2 domain, and CH4 will replace the CH3 domain. Okay, so like this, the pattern will differ based on what type of heavy chain it less. Okay. Now, what is the gross function, okay, of these regions? So mostly antigen binding is done through this variable region. Okay, so this region of the antibody is participating in the antigen binding. Okay. Now, what is the role of this constant region? Okay, both the light chain and heavy chain, their job is to bring about or give some biological activity to this antibody. Okay, so we know the antibody has to go and bind to the pathogen, and then it has to bind to some other thing, right? So the binding to the pathogen will happen through the variable region, and binding to some other component will happen through this biologically active constant regions. Okay, so first is this region will decide the solubility of the antibody. Okay, whether it is going to be secreted out or whether it is going to be remaining as a membrane bound form. So that will be decided by the constant region. Okay, what else? Then what type of target it is going to go and bind. Okay, so based on whatever is the available receptor, it will go and bind to that particular receptor. Maybe the receptor is present. If it is CD16, it is going to bind to the NK cells, macrophages. Okay, that means it has to be the IgM. Then only it is going IgG. Then only it is going to bind to this CD16. Okay, so like this, it will decide which type of receptor it should go and bind, and then what type of effect it should bring. Okay, if it is IgE, then it should go and bind to the mast cells. Mast cells will then start degranulating. Okay, degranulation and releasing the components. Okay, and that will lead to the hypersensitivity. If it is a macrophage, it will perform the phagocytosis. So like this, what type of receptor, what type of heavy chain, based on that what type of receptor is going to bind, and based on that which type of cell is associated here, and that will decide what is the effect. Okay, so that is why constant region is going to work or give a biological activity to the antibody. Okay, clear so far? Yes, online students? In all different type of antibody or within the same family of antibody? Meghna, actually, constant region will be constant in all different types of antibody. What is that? For the same family. See, when it is present, always remember, Meghna, one B cell produces only one type of antibody. Okay, so then whatever that one type of antibody it is producing, the constant region will be fixed for it. Okay, so it is like that. So actually every B cell has a capacity to give rise to different types of one specific antibody. So one B cell, one antibody, the another B cell, another antibody. Okay, third B cell, third type of antibody. Now the first B cell is suppose only going to give rise to the IgM. Then maybe after some signal it can give rise to the IgG, but that time some mechanism has to take place. Okay, but the one antibody which is produced the first time, that will be of IgM type. After it gets a signal, if it switches to IgG, then it will be only producing IgG type antibodies. That time the heavy chain will be the gamma only, not the mu type. Okay. Okay, Meghna, this part will be more clear, when we understand the antibody production through the gene rearrangement. Okay, actually it's a part of this receptor. Okay, the binding of different IG. What is the IG? Okay. See here. Okay. So binding site is the variable region. In that we have some hypervariable region which will actually come in contact with the antigen. Okay. So this part will allow the antibody to hold on to any pathogen. Suppose there is a pathogen. So it is coming and binding here. So one pathogen binds here, another pathogen binds here. Okay. Both will be same type of pathogen which will be binding. So one binding site is created by this, another binding site is created by this. Okay. After this, after the binding is over, now what this antibody has to do? Antibody has to do some job, right? So it will now look for some other type of a receptor. Now because these sites are filled, okay, this variable region is now bound with the pathogen already. So now what is the other site which is free? Now these sites are free, okay, right? So these sites will now go and bind to some specific receptor, suppose CD16 receptor, which is now present on a NK cell. Okay. So once it goes and binds to this receptor, NK cell will start releasing the lytic enzymes or different type of components. Okay, those will bring about the killing of this pathogen. Okay, so that is how the Ig will perform the different types of binding. N-terminal region, it is going to bind to the pathogen. Always remember, antibody is bivalent in nature. Okay, one combination of heavy chain, light chain creates one binding site. Another combination of heavy chain, light chain creates the another binding site. But both are binding to the same epitope of the same pathogen. Okay, so that means it will recognize the same pathogen, and two pathogens has a capacity to come and bind to the antibody. Okay. And the C-terminal region will in turn go and bind to some receptors present on some specific cells. So here in example I gave you the NK cells, CD16 receptor. Once it is binding, NK cell will get activated, or we can say some signaling pathway will be activated, which will lead the release of some components which will come and kill the pathogen. Okay, that way the binding is taking place. Now clear? Okay, fine. Now, how the structure of this antibody was actually found? This is also important. You get questions from this part. Okay. So, first study was done on immunoglobulin gamma. Okay, IgG. Fine. So, what they did, they isolated the particular globulin and then they went for enzymatic degradation. Okay, so first what enzyme they used? The enzyme used was the papain enzyme. Okay, so papain, again a protease, it has the capacity to degrade this particular antibody. Okay, when it was degraded, some fragments were isolated. Okay, and then these fragments nature were studied, the molecular weight, what type of characteristics they are showing, all these were studied. So it was found two of the fragments were identical. Okay, so these two, okay, they are found to be approximately 45 to 50 K in molecular weight. Okay, and the other one was very different. It was 50 kilodalton in molecular weight. Okay, now when they added some antigen, they found these are the regions which are, or these are the fragments which are having the antigen binding capacity. Okay, that is why these fragments are were called as FAB, fragment antigen binding, FAB. Okay, whereas the other one which is completely different, okay, this was not found to bind with the antibody. Okay, sorry, the antigen, but the other feature which was seen was when you lowered the temperature, it was found to get crystallized. Okay, that's why it was called as FC, fragment crystallizable. Okay, so that was the naming which was given. The two identical fragments of 45 kilodalton which were binding to the antigen were called as FAB. The other one, 50 kilodalton, which was not binding to the antigen, was undergoing crystallization, was called as FC region. Okay. So with this experiment, they understood that it is possible to separate the antigen binding sites from the other functional part of the antibody. Okay. Next, what they chose the pepsin enzyme. Okay. Now again, it is a protease, but it is having a different way of cleavage. Okay. So with this, what they identified, they got a complete, very big complex of the antigen binding site. Okay, and it was having two binding sites present in the same fragment. Okay, this was called as FAB prime 2. Okay, and its molecular weight was found to be nearly about 100 kilodalton. Okay, that was the molecular weight of this FAB2. So here the cleavage was not separating the two FAB fragments. Okay, it was just separating this part from the FC region. That is what it was doing. Okay, so somewhere cleavage was near to the hinge region. Okay, but the FC fragment was not included in this. FC was actually more degraded, so FC fragment was not recovered in this particular experiment. Okay, so ideally what they obtained was a huge FAB2 fragment with 2 antigen binding site. Okay, 1 and 2 antigen binding site. Next, what they did, they treated the antibody with beta mercaptan. It's a reducing agent, right? So what it does, it breaks the disulfide linkages. Okay, and once the disulfide linkages are broken, you separate the fragments. You get 2 identical heavy chains, nearly 50 kilodalton in molecular weight each, and you get 2 identical light chain, which is nearly 25 kilodalton in molecular weight each. Okay, so with this they understood the general composition of the immunoglobulin. It is made up of 4 polypeptides. 2 are identical heavy chain, 2 are identical light chain. Their molecular weight is 50 and 25 respectively. Okay, when they combine, they form some disulfide linkages. Okay, and upon this combination, they create one site which will be binding to the antibody and another site which has some role, but now it was seen to be forming a crystal. Okay, that part they have understood with this basic enzymatic digestion study. Okay, so try to remember the fragment sizes. Based on this, you can get questions. Okay. Yes. Clear so far? Yes, what about the online students? Is it clear? The structure, the basic structure of antibody and the experiment on enzyme degradation? FC fragment loses its function? Not like that, Neha. It can bind to the receptors, but that time so much was not known, right? So they only knew, okay, there is some antigen binding happening. So they were not knowing that FC fragment has got some other biological role. So that's why they did not perform that experiment. Okay. So what they did was they did some lowering of temperature and they understood, okay, it is getting crystallized. Okay. That part they understood. Fine. Okay, fine. So today we will stop here only our discussion. Fine. Try to remember the table of toll-like receptor and this general structure of antibody, the molecular weights, the enzymatic digestion. These are very important. Focus on these things. Okay. And other things, just have a general idea that what is the features of innate immunity receptor and the adaptability. That basic idea you have, but for remembering, these are important. Okay. Fine. So that way you should be preparing.